name is Chris Malmer, and I am heading SEBx, which is an innovation studio of the Swedish bank SEB. But I'll be happy to come back to that in a second. But really happy to be on here. What I thought I'll do, I think that the topic here of innovation in banking meets innovation, I think what could be helpful to begin with is maybe a little bit of a backdrop of the financial services industry. I would argue this is not necessarily a financial services industry phenomenon, but of course, we are seeing industry disruption accelerating. And I think there has been the case for some time. And I think if I look in the history of SEB, I would say maybe I'd back up 5 years to 2015 when we in the SEB Group Executive Committee started in earnest what I would refer to as a digital transformation program. And I think we had a number of different initiatives running, but the core and the essence from a management perspective was really that we had concluded that our industry is subject to disruption, which effectively means by definition, what we've been doing in the past is not going to be the recipe to be successful in the future. And with that as a kind of foundation of a core belief, that triggered, of course, a number of different activities across the group. Now, so that's the industry disruption accelerating. And of course, what we're seeing in parallel has been driving this is, of course, a combination of both technology innovation, changing regulations and changing customer behavior. And we're starting to see, movements into the financial services space, which we haven't seen to the same magnitude or the same speed over the last couple of decades. And that's on the one hand, of course, a fintech movement that is gaining traction. That's been there for a while, but it's really gaining traction. And I think it's fair to say, if you look across the neobanks across Europe, that are now counting their customers into the millions, they are definitely gaining traction with a very customer-centric and user experience driven proposition into our space. And just catching up on this article here, not only are they adding customers as sort of companion accounts or as a second account, but if you look at the next generation of customers, they often see the challenger banks even as their primary banking relationship. So that, of course, you roll forward into the future, those will be significant implications for the financial services industry. In parallel to this, of course, you've got the big tech movement as well. And most large global big tech companies are increasingly eyeing the financial services space as an area for them to continue to grow their value propositions. And I think if you look across Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook, over the last 18 to 24 months, we've seen quite significant announcements in the space of financial services. So if I'd borrow a quote that I picked up on a trip to Silicon Valley not long ago, from one of the reputable VC firms, trying to kind of summarize what's happening in the financial services space, where you got the fintech growing quickly on the one hand, you got big tech moving into the space. He kind of summarized it to say that we're now witnessing a race between how fast fintech can reach distribution versus how fast incumbents can innovate. So really, how fast can those new technology companies really move out, reach the customers, and build a value proposition and a revenue model that can work and grow, versus sort of where the revenues and the customers sit today in the traditional banking industry. How quickly can that part of the equation reinvent themselves and grow to prevent that shift of customers and assets and revenues to happen. So that's how it often is portrayed. Now, I would like to kind of take a slightly different angle to this. And I think what we've seen increasing evidence of is the value of collaboration. And I think, the trend towards, driving towards open banking and the broader collaboration between the existing financial services system and new entrants, I think is proving increasingly fruitful. I have an example here, very close to our markets in Sweden, where there was a PFM app, a personal finance app that was launched a number of years ago called Tink. And initially, at a startup phase, this is a company that positioned itself very much as a challenge to the existing banks, and was quite quickly portrayed as the one that was going to take the customers and the revenues away from the existing banks. relatively early on, we actually got close to Tink. We liked their technology. We wanted that technology into our interfaces, and we invested in the company. We teamed up with the company, and you roll forward to earlier this year. Tink is valued at north of 4 billion krona, has a number of large banks as its customer base, and is really a collaboration between the fintech world and the incumbent world that really has both grown value and increased customer satisfaction in multiple ways. So there is a lot of value in that collaboration. And I think if we go back and look at those big tech developments, behind most of those big tech efforts, there sits a traditional financial services partner. So you can see behind the Apple Card sits Goldman's balance sheet. Behind Google's cash effort, there lies a Citibank relationship. So we're seeing the combination of these, I think, creating a lot of value, and I think that's a direction of travel that we'll see more of going forward. So with that as a backdrop, our kind of insights into the how to deal with this accelerating disruption and finding the value in investing in and working together with fintechs to create new value and new opportunities. We were seeing a picture emerging where we together, from the incumbent side of things, the trust in the brand, the trust in the relationships, the customers where they are today, but also their data, of course, products and licenses, and some of these things which are cumbersome for new startups to move into, and that requires a lot of administration and work over a long period of time. Knowledge and experience. SEB has been around for 160 years. Of course, there's a lot of value being built in dealing with this industry, credit cycles, different challenges over those years. So taking those strengths and blending them with, of course, modern technology, which is one, of course, the key competitive advantages of the fintech space. But not just that, but of course, the agile and nimble approach and ways of working with this, obsession around customer centricity and the kind of starting from the customer and working backwards. And of course, being able to do this, address the traditional challenges of finance from a legacy-free perspective. So basically allowing these startups to really address financial services in completely new ways. So, of course, those are, the two dimensions that we felt if we can bring those two dimensions together, that will allow us to really, start creating value, which we had been doing, in the fintech space. So question that pops up, can we actually do this, in-house, bringing those two perspectives together? And so it began. We're back about 24 months from today, where we decided to start what we call SEBx. And the foundation behind that was basically bringing those two worlds together, but organizationally realizing that this will not be done in the context of our existing technology, but not just technology, but also processes, procedures, and structures which have been around for many years and that needed to be challenged. So we set this up as a completely independent organization, reporting directly to the CEO, but leveraging on all the strengths of the incumbent. So part of the kind of legal entity, if you like, of the SEB group, but organizationally completely outside and at the fringe of the organization. And here's a picture that you can see from the very early days of the life of SEBx, where we had a small team of, I think we were 7 people from the very beginning who set this up, and now I'm at a conference room at our offices in Solna, just outside of Stockholm, and just a few rooms down the road is this very room that you see here, where we were basically starting to elaborate with, what do we do with this mandate? The mandate is to, start from scratch, build banking from scratch, blend the strength of the fintech with the strength of the incumbent, and do something exciting. Of course, this was a relatively frustrating task to begin with, because of course the opportunities and the options were so vast, and where did you begin? But relatively early on, we zoomed in on ensuring that there was going to be a dual, very clearly articulated dual purpose of SEBx: build new products and explore new tech. Now, building new products, a lot of innovation labs, a lot of transformation programs inside incumbent banks focus very much on exploring new tech. This is a cool technology. How can you work with machine learning? How do you apply AI? but how do you actually make sure that it's driven by a product, a value proposition to a customer? So starting really with build new products and explore new tech, but we shouldn't explore tech that doesn't drive the value proposition. And in building new products, we really held ourselves to really high standards. So we said, look, this needs to be a business that could stand on its own 2 feet. We used the Sequoia, template for pitch template. If you want to raise money from the venture capital firm Sequoia, you need to be, pitching to them your value proposition and the reason you should getting their money, answering certain questions. And we said we really want to be able to, answer those questions and make sure, that whatever the value proposition is that we're offering, it's strong enough to stand on its own 2 feet. Now, so with that kind of on the one hand side, building new products, we could then start to explore new tech. How would we build a bank from scratch, but with this very clear value proposition in mind? So if I start with the first side, building new products, because that's really the lead in the initiative. We had this vast opportunity of things to go for. What kind of products do we want to build? What kind of services do we think make sense? How do we leverage this fantastic mandate to kind of build new technology and new services from scratch? Whilst at the same time building something, zooming in on something and really getting something out the door, so it doesn't just become an exploration program. We then found a particular customer segment called solo, which we call the solopreneur. This is not the entrepreneur who grows and builds a business. This is a solopreneur who works for themselves. This is the one man or woman business where the life of the individual and the business is completely intertwined. So there's no employees. This is the gig economy worker, the freelancer, if you like. And we saw from the data within the bank that this is a growing segment. And not only is it a growing segment, but it is a segment that we find is increasingly struggling to address financial services simply because you either need to be perceived as an individual or as a company. Institutions really struggle with the concept of this kind of intertwined view. So the individual sees themselves as one. It's me and my business. I live my craft. I'm a photographer. I'm a designer. Whatever I do. But the institution in the outside world says, okay, here's the private individual, Christoffer, and here's the business that Christoffer runs. So kind of from that, starting to think, what is it that this customer group? Why are they not properly serviced in the market? And really, not forget about the technology exploration. This was just focusing solely on the value that we could create for this customer segment. Is it interesting? We found this global growth market is growing rapidly. We found supportive demographics. So not only is it growing, but we can see it even more so in the coming generations. And is there a customer need? Well, we could start from doing our initial research to see that there was a significant amount of time spent by self-employed or solopreneurs dealing with administration and finance, which was not the reason they started the business in the first place. And what's so fascinating is that there's surveys in Sweden that shows that this form of employment, self-employment, creates the most happy individuals. So they find the quality of life the highest. So they find the quality of life the highest because they get to work with what they love, but still they're spending up to 44 hours per month dealing with business, finance, and administration, which is not what creates that joy. So we thought here's really an opportunity, not just to enlighten and help facilitate the life and the world of the self-employed, but it's also a great opportunity to encourage people to start their own business, try and kind of go for their passion and live their dream. So with this as a starting point, now we think we have the concept of what new product we want to build. We started to quickly then get prototypes in front of customers, getting solopreneurs into the room, making sure that we build something that is relevant, that they'd be interested in, and very quickly going from this broad range of ideas to focusing on the solopreneur, and then starting to put products in front of them. Fast forward till today. We today have a product in beta that we're looking to scale. We call it Enco. It brings together kind of challenging or undoing the status quo. That's where Enco comes from. And it's a product that really tries to address the specific needs and requirements of the self-employed solopreneur, bringing together the life side of things and the work side of things into really one relationship. So it's a beta that we're now running, and we are looking for beta users. So please have a look at enco.com. If you are self-employed, if you want to go and have a look. And I think this is also, if I'm not incorrect here, there's some sneak peeks here from a new product page that will be actually launched next week. So there's a little bit of a sneak peek going for you here. So this is really the product side of things. This, we in mindset-wise, this could be a startup in and of itself. Now, in parallel to this, and of course, a challenging prospect for the team is to make sure that we're exploring and building tech at the same time. So if you look at the SEBx technology platform, it powers the value proposition of Enco. That's a product that we're building. That's a value proposition that we're creating. That's a revenue opportunity we want to go after. But under the technology platform, under the hood, if you like, of the SEBx platform, there are very generic, reusable, and scalable components. So the ambition is really to make sure that whatever we build for Enco should be things that we could be leveraging not just for Enco, other parts either of the bank, other startups. We could be an open banking platform that allows other startups to also build their value propositions on top of this technology. For example, for the core banking engine part of things, we've actually struck a relationship with a fintech startup in the UK called Thought Machine. We've also invested into the company and using that technology to power Enco, but maybe we could also power broader parts of the bank with that technology. So really building this scalable, reusable, and flexible core, and trying those technologies, leveraging that into the bank, but of course powering the value proposition of SEBx, which is Enco. So, to sum it up, this is by no means we argue that we have kind of figured it out. We haven't, we don't proclaim victory in incumbent banking innovation, but for us it's been an extremely valuable learning journey that is just about to accelerate, both for the bank to learn to work with innovation in completely new ways and what we can leverage into the rest of the group, what kind of talent we can attract, how we can position new products. But also, of course, in the way that we're then building products and trying to create new revenue opportunities for the group and for the venture that we're building. So exciting times, still relatively early days, but we're super excited about where we are. We're happy to share our experience, both as an incumbent and as a startup, if you like, being a little bit of a hybrid between the two. So really, that's what we had to share. Feel free to follow us on SEBx.io. We're always looking for people, so there's a number of ads out if you want to have a look and join the team. We're on LinkedIn and building a community of solopreneurs in Sweden as well. So plenty of opportunities to get in touch, and would love to reach out to you. So thanks so much for the opportunity to speak. Apologies again for the hiccup in the beginning. Hope you got to stay with us, and I think now we are going to have a look at the question session. So let's see if I get some questions here. Okay, so there's I'll just go through the ones I find in the chat here. What neobanks are offering is greater understandable in user experience. The blockchain is also taking a large proportion of the traditional banking market. I think it's a very good point. And I think, spot on, greater understandable user experience. And I think highlighted on one of the pictures there is really that, that's where it comes from. That's a starting point of fintech. And that's such an important learning. I think I'm a banks analyst myself. I mean, following banks for, as long as I've been working. I used to be a banks analyst at Goldman Sachs in London. I then been an investor investing in banks, and now I work for a bank. So I think the perspective of banking for, as long as we can remember, has been very much built up on, how do you build a bank? It's going to be safe, secure, and you interact with your customers. And here comes a whole new breed that says, hang on a second, we're going to start with the customer experience and we're going to work our way backwards. That has been a huge learning for the industry. And I think a lot of banks have taken that on board, and then of course there's the processes and the structures and things that have been built over those decades of years, and how do you try and change them quickly? For SEB, by no means are we going to slow down the transformation of the group and do exactly what you referred to, which is to kind of look at the user experience. That's going to happen in SEB as we continue. But this gives us an opportunity to start something fresh on the side and try and address those challenges in a slightly different way. I'll move forward, and I agree with your point on the blockchain and digital currencies. I mean, there's definitely a way in which it can more fundamentally revamp the banking market. Rebate Africa is the neobank solution built to encompass symbiotic ecosystems between traditional banks and disruptive technologies. Our main goal isn't only focused on banking, but I think that's super exciting. Bringing those two coexistence of the fintech ecosystem and the incumbent system, I think is tremendously interesting. There's another question here. I read on one of your slides that you support startups with data. How do you do this in practice? Data is expensive commodity most startups don't have access to and need to put a lot of efforts to building themselves. So accessing this from SEBx is very valuable. Yeah, it's a great question. So how do we work with data? Well, as you know, I mean, not only is it it's a valuable commodity, but it's also a very sensitive resource. We have the GDPR regulations, so we have a number of data protection, and on top of that, in financial services, we of course have bank secrecy as well. So data is sensitive. Now, how do we share and work that with other groups? Now, as far as SEBx is concerned, right now we are in the midst of building data, because our customer base consists of beta users at this point in time. So now we are at a point of building data to be able to continue to develop the product and stay relevant to the customers. But I think the idea going forward is to say that how could we work, how could we enrich the ecosystem? So if Enco talks to the self-employed and the solopreneur, how do we enrich that ecosystem? We may not build everything ourselves. We may be working with partners that brings value to those customers. And in that intersection, there's ways in which we can say, okay, here we have data about customers, and we can then team up with other fintech companies to provide their services into the relevant target audience. But of course, governing that data, managing the regulations that surround the data, and harboring and hosting that data, of course, is always going to be a question that needs to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. But I think the value of being able to know and work with your customers and then bring value propositions from inside or from the outside is definitely a way of leveraging that data. Jens Frid, great session. Thank you. One of the founders of Scale Out Systems, pioneering federated learning. Our solutions enables machine learning. Okay, great, thank you. Shout out, and we'll get in touch with you. Awesome. Here's another fintech startup building an open banking platform. What are the most interesting areas within open banking right now? It's a great question. I think, to me, I think it's really, if you think about the way open banking has come about, it's kind of been, we've had a lot of great fintech companies that's been built upon kind of traditional legacy banking plumbing, for many years. But that hasn't really happened with the kind of conscious intent of the incumbent banks. But it's been a plumbing that's been there, and people have been able to build value propositions, within payments, within neobanking or others. So I think that's what's happening now when it comes to open banking. I think is that a lot of institutions, SEB is one of them, says, well, you know what? Let's make ourselves accessible. Let's not just see people bounce around and pick data off us, and without us necessarily not even knowing it. Certain regulations are now enforcing banks to provide certain types of data. But why just stay at that regulatory minimum? Why not say, how do we create those opportunities? So when we're building SEBx, we are designing it for open banking. And I think the big change then that's coming, I think, is an openness from incumbent banks to say, hey, how do we actually collaborate? And so those areas within open banking, they're going to span a number of different product ranges. But the game changer to me will be that this will be a kind of two-way street and intended, by design open banking opportunities. And everyone who builds, take an example, anyone who would start up any kind of fintech business today, would set it up in the cloud. Just cloud native, hands down. No bank that's been around for more than 20 years on the planet Earth sits cloud native. They all have mainframe, on-premise backend infrastructures, because that's how they've been built over decades and decades. So, now when we're setting things up and building them in the cloud, building the cloud native, the opportunities to connect is so much greater. So to me, the open banking game is just really beginning. A lot of questions here. Let's see if I can pick off a few more. Interesting approach on corporate innovation hub. I take your own development work go beyond prototyping. How much are your business units involved and investing in the project? So it is, SEBx is a business unit in of itself. It's an organizational unit that builds and has its own budget, employs people. We are today about 50 people. I'd say about 35 of them are employed, 50 about so are consultants, and we're using consultants in different areas, sometimes to pick up speed quickly, sometimes to, of course, get access really high-end experience and competence. So, building that organization, blending those two worlds. So it's a business unit. As far as other business units collaborating, what we're doing here is really, again, being part of the SEB group. We're asking ourselves, what are those opportunities? What opportunities comes to that? Well, the balance sheet. We've got a treasury department. We've got access to capital markets, access to funding. We've got years and years of experience in a number of different product areas. How do we blend that experience, knowledge, those licenses, those assets, and those strengths? And how do we blend them with the ability to start from scratch and build new technology? So it's really kind of the collaboration with the rest of the group. And I think it's an interesting question as well, because I think, over those, around 2 years we've been up and running, we've had a number of discussions with other companies who also do kind of incumbent innovation in this way, and making sure that this particular entity that sits outside of the group really gets the strength and the speed that it needs, working together with the rest of the organization without kind of being new and old and kind of getting a clash between the two parts, but rather leveraging them. And again, we're not claiming to have found the recipe for this, but we're certainly learning as we go along, and we're excited about it. So now I think I've been flagged that time is really running out. I think I will thank you so much for those questions. You'll reach me as well, Christoffer Malmer at LinkedIn. So if there's any questions or any connections here that I haven't been able to follow up on, please feel free to reach out. I'll be very happy to connect. And with that, I think we'll be wrapping up. Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you out there. Bye.